animal.
Welcome, fellow Storm Riders. You are officially a rider on the Hypnotic Storm. Welcome to session number 51 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. He thinks Black Sabbath is the greatest metal band of all time, cooks amazing scallops à l'orange, and is convinced that time is passing faster every day.
Yes, it is.
He is the living Hypnoticon, the transducer par excellence. Please welcome Mike Mandel.
Yes, Chris, the transducer is in the house. No applause, please. Just throw money. We have such fun with these. Number 50 was a great podcast because we generated considerable interest by talking about mentalism again.
Yes.
And it's such a remarkable field. Influence. Well, another one you can throw in, those of you who listen to 50, probably is just about everybody listening right now, notice, remember I said the ocean in the sky idea, setting the geometric shapes. If you got a good result with that, and you also got a good result with the number appearing, which is number 37 is the first choice, and people are amazed with your telepathic abilities, if you want to go a bit further, you can send them yet another image. You say, this time, I'm going to send you an image. Out of the thousands and thousands possible, I'm going to cause you to think of a furry animal. And you focus and focus and focus. The overwhelming majority of people with the words furry animal. Do you know what it is, Chris? I know you'll get it wrong because you're...
Yeah, well, my kids are obsessed with chipmunks, so I'm probably it's not that.
It's a bear.
Really?
A bear, yeah. And the way I got this was a TV show, and it was one of these stupid things where, you know, people vote on our survey says, and how many people said this. And when they said furry animal... almost everybody, 80% of them, so we got Pareto's principle, said bear. So I just scored that away and started using it on stage, and it works.
That's hilarious.
But another one you can do, I used to do a blindfold act and have my face covered with cotton around my eyes, taped up with masking tape, a heavy-duty blindfold, and people would hold an object between my hands, and I'd be able to get senses and impressions of it. It's a set of house keys and this sort of thing, right? But I would often say to the person, do you have a scar on your left knee? And I'd say that if it was a woman, especially. And almost always they gasp. Women are far more aware of their scars than men are. Guys think they're cool.
Yeah.
Women think they're disgusting and distasteful.
Horrible, yeah.
So as a general principle, so when you say a scar on your left knee, most right-handed people
will have
a scar on their left knee because of how you fall.
Yes.
And it will freak them out. And what I used to say, I mean, it's, sorry, a horrible cough here. What I used to say was, do you have a scar on your left knee? And the woman goes, yes. And I would say something like, and that underwear is very, very attractive as well. So then the audience would burst out laughing. There's all the fun we used to have in the 70s and 80s with this sort of joke.
That's hilarious about the left knee
thing. The implication is that you can see beneath someone's clothing with your amazing power. And I'd be blindfolded, of course, while I'm saying this, and can apparently see through the blindfold and the jeans and whatnot. So on we go.
All right, so...
Hey, wait a minute. I do think time is going faster. Certainly my perception of it is. Chris, I'm interested if our listeners are picking up on this. This freaks me out beyond measure because... it seems to me it's always frickin' Friday. Now, it's Tuesday as we're recording this.
Yes.
But in about 20 minutes, it'll be Friday. It's just, I wake up, my wife says, it's Friday again. I go, no. It feels like the week is about 5 days long now. Anyone else notice time is going faster? Let me know.
Right. Okay, let's get on with the content we want to talk about today, which are the laws of suggestion.
Oh, that's a good one. The laws of suggestion is a point that's come up upon occasion. When you are doing actual hypnosis with another human being, there are a number of things you can apply, which are laws or really principles of suggestion that will enable you to be far more effective in installing programs with someone. So what comes to mind here, Chris?
Well, let me just pre-frame this as well, that this is going to be useful for hypnotherapists, hypnotists, but also in everyday conversation, right?
Of course, and if you're a street hypnotist, you can use this as well. Any type of hypnosis, any type of influence, but it is designed primarily to be very, very effective and efficient in constructing hypnotic suggestions that will affect people. You see, the old methods are rather pathetic. Speak in a monotone, say things 3 times. Always, everything has to be said 3 times. 3 times, 3 times, 3 times. I heard a stage hypnotist do this. You're getting very tired this evening, very sleepy tonight, very sleepy this evening, very tired tonight, very tired this evening, very sleepy tonight, everything. 3, 3, 3. You're getting very tired, you're getting very tired, you're getting very tired. You're sinking into your chair, you're sinking into your chair.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm not.
I'm getting bored.
It's not boring.
Getting bored.
Annoyed. And so there are laws, or at least principles, that enable you to construct good suggestions. The first one is the law of familiarity. And what this means is, it doesn't mean, I've heard that suggestion before. It means if something is familiar, it's more easy to accept than something that is completely new and weird.
Okay, so as an example, on your stage in your stage shows. On your stage shows wouldn't make sense.
No.
In your stage shows, when you get people involved in that homo action and hetero action loop of feeling itchy or hot or cold or mosquitoes are attacking them or whatever, these are things that are familiar. Everybody has been on a hot beach where it's really hot, and everybody's been in most people have been in at least in Canada, most people have been in very cold environments as well. So those things are familiar, right?
But that's a perfect example, Chris, and being bitten by insects. Now, if I did something completely off the wall and said, and you can feel your skin tingling from the radon gas in the air.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense to people. Well, what's that? It's not familiar. Most people are not human Geiger counters, so they're not going to determine something like this. Yeah. They're not going to be able to sense it. And the fact that it's familiar, it's something that they're already aware of and have already experienced, it's much easier to create it.
Right.
So that's a real key here. Work within the person's own schema. So I worked with a memory guy years ago, and he would run all these different memory systems. And we've talked about this in our podcast about memory. I think we did a couple of them touching on how you take a feature of someone's face, and the obvious feature, in my case, obviously the nose, and that is what you would choose. Shut up. And so you choose an object, and then you're going to link their name to it or whatever. So,
like I would look at your nose and I would imagine that it was a microphone or something with little mesh holes in it. And stuff.
I have an absolutely hilarious answer to that, which cannot be said on a family-friendly podcast. But suffice to say, it concerns Chris's features and a certain portion of the male anatomy. Anyway, so let it go. Let it go. Tapping away. Let it go. So you say the guy, as Harry Lorraine said, his name is Mr. Smolensky.
Yeah.
You turn it into Smolensky, into small N skiing. Yeah. So you see a small letter N skiing down his nose.
Right.
So next time you see the guy, you go, he's got a prominent nose. What was on his? Oh, he was a little letter N. Mr. Oh, hello, Mr. Smolensky. Okay,
yeah.
You got it. Well, this memory guy was not using the familiar stuff. So he had all this stuff in his act, showing people how to memorize things, and he chose
weird stuff.
Jimmy Durante. Do you even know who that is?
No.
Now, I'm 61, and I barely know who Jimmy Durante is.
Okay, so pick people who are familiar with your
He was an old guy
audience.
who had a big nose, like in the 40s, like in movies and stuff.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
So he said, I realized that was too old, so I switched it to Jamie Farr.
Now, still don't know who that is.
Oh, no, you don't. Jamie Farr was on MASH. He was Corporal Klinger, and he had a big nose. And he's still like decades out of date.
Okay, clueless.
So the same with suggestions. Pick things that are going to resonate with someone.
And this actually applies to metaphor too, right? If you want to tell a story to an audience that's going to really get them in the emotional state that you want them,
right?
Tell a story that's going to seem like it could be familiar to them at least, right?
Sure. And like you said, emotional state, as soon as you bring the emotions in with hypnosis or with suggestion, it is far more powerful. When you're getting derived emotions from something like a film where something is not happening to you directly, but you're watching it in a movie, those are the movies you remember.
Absolutely.
You don't remember movies, well, unless they were so incredibly boring that you hated them. You remember the wrong reason. But the stuff that engages the emotions will be the most powerful. And when you're engaging the emotions, you're by and large engaging the right brain as well. So that's another aspect to this. When you're giving a suggestion to someone, engage their emotions. And you don't want to just say, you're going to be more powerful at work. You're going to be in the zone. You're going to get your job done. Just all this data. You're going to say, and think of how great you're going to feel when you shine and your boss gives you that acclaim. Bring the emotions into the suggestion. That's much more powerful. So what's next?
Oh, well, let's see. Let's talk about truth and logic.
Okay, truth and logic,
illogical suggestions, of course, aren't going to have
much
effect.
If it's illogical, it will wear off quickly. So let's say you're dealing with someone for smoking cessation. The old way was to say, you're going to cough and hack every time you try to smoke and you'll eventually quit. And I did that in my youth, and it does work.
Sure.
Of course.
And there's some logic to the fact that it makes you cough.
But if you say every time you light a cigarette, Superman is going to appear and demand that you throw that out right away, it's not as likely to work because it's not logical. It's stupid.
That said, if they have huge loops in their handwriting and
they'll be able to imagine it very well,
then you might do that
That's quite true. In fact, there was a study done years ago, Chris, and what I mean about truth and logic, I meant specifically to get them to accomplish this task.
Right.
It should make sense to a degree. Now, there is a sense that the more bizarre a suggestion is, the more likely the brain will accept it. I'm saying bizarre. There's a whole weird corollary to this. A study was done many years ago where 100 people were asked, they were given postcards that were pre-stamped and addressed, and they were told to just mail one every day. The second group was hypnotized to mail one every day. And the third group was hypnotized with a bizarre suggestion to mail one every day. The third group, before they mailed it, had to stand in front of the mailbox, bang it on their head, and go, "Arr, arr, arr." Now, guess what happened at the end of the day? Guess which group mailed most of them?
The third group.
The group, the chicken clucking rooster group, mailed most of them. The second most consistent group were the people who were just asked to do it.
Yeah, not hypnotized at all.
Right.
Because so the idea of hypnotizing them and giving them a very ordinary suggestion was kind of boring. So it didn't have any purpose.
It doesn't tag clearly. It fades because it has no purpose.
So there was either some more emotional charge to...
something so bizarre they couldn't forget it.
Yeah.
So in a way...
Oh, that's really interesting too, because it's sort of like the idea you talked about how to Smolensky, the small end skiing on the nose. I mean, it's a bizarre thing, so you can't forget it. You'll always remember it, just like the weird suggestion.
Exactly. So truth and logic makes sense. If you're trying to help someone, it will be trying if you're illogical. If you are logical with your suggestions, that will be really good. And this brings us to the law of reverse effect.
Okay.
This is a classic hypnotic process or hypnotic understanding. We get what we try to avoid. That's right. So another way to put it is what we resist persists. And everybody's experienced this with insomnia.
Yeah, try to sleep. Try not to stay awake all night.
Oh, yeah. Like, the more you resist being awake, the more you try to sleep.
Yeah.
Because the harder and harder it becomes. And you see this in almost every hostage movie. At some point, the people whose family members, friends, or whatever are taken hostage will be sitting up, and they've been up for 40 hours and they're exhausted, and the police interrogator will say, try to get some sleep. You'll hear that in so many movies now. But reversed effect, if you try not to fall, you'll probably fall.
Right.
So that's why we talk about what you want to do instead of what you don't want to do. And the classic example, too, is anything that you resist, the harder you resist, and not example, but the principle is the harder you resist something, the more you're focusing on the very thing that you don't want. So always focus on what you want instead of what you don't want. And the number of people came into my office and I'd say, what do you want? Well, I don't want to be depressed. I'd say, okay, well, suppose I hypnotize you, make you terrified of carpets.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want that either. Okay, so do you want to be a tin miner on Jupiter? No, I don't want that either. The list of what you don't want is infinite.
It's really fascinating because once you learn this and once you really absorb it, you will notice people telling you all the time what they don't want. And you get in the habit of saying, okay, so what is it that you do want?
Right. And that's much, much better. When you ask what they want, it identifies the target state, and then the brain can start using the reticular activating system to move towards it.
And it's actually quite funny because you'll say to somebody something, or I will say, like, okay, you've told me what you don't want, so what is it that you do want? And they repeat what they don't want, they don't even comprehend. And then so you say it a second or even a third time if necessary, and it finally breaks the shell and they kind of clue in and go...
So you tell me you don't want them to do that anymore?
Yeah, very good. Nice.
I'm a comic genius. Now listen, so reverse effect. We get what we try to avoid, what we resist persists. The law of dominant effect is another wonderful aspect of suggestion, which means that, as I said, emotionally charged things are more effective. Stronger suggestions will override weaker ones.
Right.
So that's why you really have to build, if you have a weak suggestion that's telling you to eat potato chips every day and you've installed this yourself somehow, or, snack before bed, you need something powerful to wipe that out so we can actually get competing anchors in a case like this.
So let me I'm just thinking for example, I don't know why, but I'm thinking about healthy eating right now. And so the idea if somebody wanted to be healthier and you gave them a post-hypnotic suggestion to focus on healthier eating, might not be as effective as telling them that they would suddenly find themselves much more interested in making their own healthy meals and preparing,
that's wonderful. Yeah.
Getting more involved in the process, not just going to go buy something healthier,
and that's typical Erickson.
Cooking.
He would have them really enjoy the process. And Erickson would typically work with married couples who had trouble in their sex life and had lost intimacy, and he'd tell them to prepare a meal together. He'd hypnotize them. You're going to go home and make this delicious dinner together. And it would bring in the whole cooperation and everything and would map across into,
what a wonderful
bop it in the beater. And, So we got reverse effect. We've got dominant effect that the stronger ones will override the weaker ones. And another one is the obvious thing that the greater the depth of the trance, the greater likelihood that suggestions are going to stick.
Okay.
And you remember
Let's
I
talk
said
about that.
So many times, Chris, we hear,
You
People
only
say,
need
you
a
only
light
need, you knew where I was
trance.
going.
Yeah.
You only need a light trance to make all kinds of changes. Yes. But why do they say that over and over and over?
Well,
Because
these are the
most
people
of
that
them
are
can
usually
only
script
create
readers.
light trances because they're often script readers or just inept.
Right.
And when you can zone people through the floor, not surprisingly, you'll get a much, much stronger depth of trance, which will be much more robust and resistant to being fragmented, and then consequently your suggestions will hit. They'll be much, much stronger as a result of that as well.
By the way, speaking of scripts, Mike, we just published a series of videos so for those of you out there who are interested in learning more about hypnosis and learning about the myths and having Mike explain how those myths are untrue, one of which is about hypnosis scripts, head on over to mikemandelhypnosis.com/hypnosis-myths, myths with an S on the end, plural, hypnosis -myths, and you'll sign up for a series of videos that are really fun but educational as well. I will be upfront and tell you the whole purpose here is to promote the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, which is totally awesome and risk-free, but you're going to love the videos.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.
So let's go on to our next one here.
The law of primacy.
Remember, but back up a second. Let's go back to depth for a moment. The deeper
Sure.
the trance, the greater chance the suggestions are going to be accepted. If you are always zoning people through the floor, you'll get better results. But there's the Mandel loop that a lot of people don't know, and it's a wonderful thing. The greater the depth, the greater the rapport you will have with the subject, automatically.
That makes sense.
Not just NLP rapport, where you're in sync, but hypnotic rapport as well, which is a totally different thing. Related, though. Hypnotic rapport is where the subject responds only to the hypnotist and is not distracted by surroundings, other people, conversations, or whatever. And of course, this can be handed off and tagged to another person easily. In fact, some hypnosis books say, always tag it to another person and say, if the unthinkable should happen and I should have a heart attack and die during this induction, then Chris will be able to bring you out of it.
Man.
People take this stuff so seriously. So anyway, the greater the depth, the greater the rapport. One of the ways to build more powerful trances is simply get greater rapport with your subject.
That is an interesting one. So let's talk about that. How do you generate good rapport with a subject?
Well, of course, you're going to honor their model of the world. Mm-hmm. Erickson operated from a principle of absolute integrity, and that's why he got such amazing results. Listen, guys, if you want to use this stuff to manipulate people and damage people's lives and just be a nasty person and dominate people, you'll probably be able to do it to a degree, but it'll come back on you one way or another. You'll be a far more powerful hypnotist if you operate with integrity. Mm-hmm. And when you have the absolute well-being and happiness of the person in front of you as your primary concern, you'll be far more effective because that in and of itself will build greater rapport. So caring about the other person, being interested in their life and honoring their model of the world instead of questioning, challenging it, and attempting to dominate them will go a long, long way to building rapport. And of course, then there's all the classic NLP methods of offering back the person's own language. If the person says, I'm feeling very uncomfortable lately, and you say, that's right, you're feeling very uncomfortable lately. Same words. You don't say, I understand you're a little upset.
And you have that itchy sensation on your right knee.
That's right.
Where does that come from?
Yeah,
well, I guess that could be uncomfortable.
Work. So that's another classic thing. Build depth by building rapport. And then primacy is the law of compounding. If I give suggestions A, B, and C, and then repeat them, and maybe repeat them again, suggestion A will be by and large the most powerful one, followed by B, followed by C. So you should always give your strongest and most important suggestions, let's say, up front, because they will be the ones that will tend to hit stronger than anything. And the more and more you layer on other suggestions, the more they will tend to keep reinforcing that first one,
right,
even if you're not mentioning it. It's sort of an unusual paradox.
Now, this is just making me think also about the idea of using these concepts in an influential way outside of the context of therapeutic hypnosis or whatever. So if you were a salesperson and you wanted somebody to be convinced to buy a certain product, you might start with a discussion around the brand to make sure that they understood that this was the right brand. And that suggestion, once accepted, makes it easier. Actually, that's more hetero action, I guess, in a way, but it's sort of related.
Yeah, it is
the
related.
Idea that,
These things are all related.
If I can get somebody to believe that Apple is the best computer out there, there's our...
$10.
There we go. Yeah. then we can discuss the fact that, a MacBook or an iMac or an iPhone or whatever it is the right product
Chris,
for you.
I'm just laughing because I hear you effortlessly drifting into the language patterns after all your use. If I can, then.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Fantastic.
There you go. Unconscious competence, folks.
Now, let's move on here. The law of variety. This is a good thing. If you're giving people hypnotic suggestions or attempting to influence them, don't keep saying the same thing over and over and over.
Change it up.
Change it up. You'll be very relaxed. You'll sleep well through the night. You'll feel so comfortable when you go to bed. You'll awaken refreshed. All different ways of saying they're going to have a good night's sleep. Mm-hmm. One of them is way more liable to hit if you give a huge variety of methods. So change it up. Say your suggestions in different ways for the same things.
Okay, so when I speak to you, Mike, about moving away from Microsoft's horrible operating system, I shouldn't just remind you how often your computer crashes and how frustrated that it makes you feel, but I should remind you how incredibly pleasing it is to use a Bluetooth keyboard that just seamlessly integrates with a functioning operating system and a machine that doesn't crash and that just looks beautiful and has a retina display.
Wide awake now.
All right.
Nice one.
Oh, there we go.
Now, let's talk about literalness. Literalness basically means the deeper the trance, according to Raphael Rhodes' psychic relative exclusion theory, the deeper the trance, the more the unconscious mind is in the foreground and the more the conscious mind has receded. So, according to people like Janet, who talked...
Wide awake now.
Thank you. Talked extensively about dissociation and so on. There's always part of your mind present as a hidden observer in that theory. So your conscious mind has never gone completely. But when your unconscious is in the foreground, that's when you have to be very, very literal with suggestions, or when your subject's unconscious is in the foreground. The more the unconscious is present, the more the person will respond robotically and more like a child, because you want to use very, very literal suggestions when someone is in a deep trance. That's not your time to go to metaphor and say, that sensation down below that place where you thought you could modify all that went on before, that's right. No, you just want to say, you want to say, take that feeling and amplify it.
And you can test this, right? So once you know that they're in a deep hypnotic state, somnambulistic state, not a Samuelistic state, you can test them.
Or somnambulistic. You can test it. Now listen, this whole literalness thing also means the unconscious will be very, very literal. It doesn't respond to metaphor the same as the conscious mind. So the literalness means if you say to someone who's wide awake, can you tell me your name? They'll say, Dave. You say to someone in somnambulistic trance, can you tell me your name? He'll say, yes.
Yeah, and so when you test them,
literally.
You can test them by asking that.
Right.
See what they say. They say yes.
Which brings us to this Victorian repressed English thing of all these, I was wondering if you would be so kind as to pass me the salt. In other words, you're wondering about his kindness.
Yes.
And that means he passes the salt.
And you're wondering if he's kind enough to pass the salt. Not if he would actually do it when he's feeling so kind. Wonderful. All right, so let's see. Is there anything else? Literalness. Okay, so as a test, you could ask somebody, "Can you tell me your name?" And they'll say yes, I can.
Tell the name. Yes.
Yeah, or you could say, "Where are you?" And he'll
say here,
or in a chair, or something like that.
But all of our students, they know how to test this stuff because they're able to calibrate your subject.
And once you've done that, then you would offer very direct and clear and simple, literal suggestions.
Exactly.
That's right. And repeat them several times. In exactly the same words. In a boring... No, I'm kidding.
I've got an empowering question, Chris.
All right. Let's do it.
I want those of you listening to ask yourself this, or at least let this resonate with you. Who in your life are you most able to influence, and how will you do it for their benefit today? Who in your life are you most able to influence, and how will you do it for their benefit today?
That's right. All right, folks, this has been session number 51 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. And before we do the closing, we're going to move into the closing metaphor.
Yes, and this is an ongoing one, Chris. Near my house, there's a strip mall, actually a larger mall than a strip mall, and there's a future shop there. And about a block away, there was a large open area with some scrub, some grassland, and the Canada geese, which are proliferating in this area, were nesting, and it's now being turned into commercial blocks of offices, not that they're going to be renting out and using for
real estate.
Real estate is the word I've been looking for 5 minutes. Thank you. So they've driven the Canada geese out, which is sad. But right near the future shop, as my wife pointed out, You can drive there on any given day, and there's a big, huge, beautiful male Canada goose, about 2.5, 3 feet tall, strutting around the parking lot, and people are trying not to hit him. And they have just nested in the midst of everyone, because right in the parking lot by the sidewalk, there's a patch of grass, maybe 3 feet by 3 feet, and the female goose has built a nest there and is sitting on it, apparently about to hatch some eggs. And the male goose stands a few feet away, keeping guard. And all around them, the cars go whizzing by, and people are shopping with bags of things. And in a while, the parking lot will be covered with baby geese walking in lines, attempting to avoid the cars.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to podcast episode 51 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. So make sure you head on over to our website, MikeMandelHypnosis.com, sign up for our email list, get a copy of Mike's awesome Brain Software ebook, which is life-changing stuff. Check out the live classes we've got for you. Make sure you check out the online training as well, the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, which you can see over at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/academy. And last but not least, the simplest task of all, head on over and leave a rating for this podcast in iTunes. You'll find a link over to the iTunes podcast in the Apple Store there. You'll find it right on our website under the podcast tab. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
and
again.
We'll see you on the next episode, which will be number 52, and we'll keep it rolling.
Mr. Thompson, I ever tell you the story about Squatter and the library book?
I don't think you have. Tell me about it.
About 6 months before Squatter accidentally had his head chopped off by Bryce Morgan, bringing his life to a wonderful, flamboyant ending that was so incredibly funny. The adventure of Chung-Ling Soo and the magic and the guillotine and so on. Anyway, about 6 months prior to that, we were all sitting in Blades Club having lunch. We were having some fillet of sole, and Squatter was there as well, and we were all sitting around the table. We had some oysters, and Squatter looked at those with a degree of sadness and irritation because of his previous experience and tried to open one with a straight razor. We were joking about it all, and he was doing much better now, and over the fillet of sole and some brandy afterwards, we were all sitting together. And Bryce Morgan came bustling in, and he had a scarf around his neck, and he was very cold out, and he had a number of presents he was disappearing with to take them to Lady Melbury. He had an assignation with her, as it were. I think they were going to hang about together all afternoon and commit osculation. So Bryce Morgan had to leave, and he said, "Oh, damn." He said, I'm supposed to get this back to the National Library. And he threw a book on the table, a wonderful-looking book. It was by James Esdale called Mesmerism in India. And this is where Bryce Morgan had learned much of his hypnotic act from. And he said, "I've got to get this back before it's overdue." He said, I've got to get these presents to Lady Melbury as well. And Squatter said, "Well, I'm going past the library. I'll take it for you," which, of course, was the entire point. And so we finished up lunch, and the Squatter had quite a bit of brandy, and he started heading out. And Peter Fitzwadsworth-Smythe and Ray Houston were chuckling to themselves, knowing that obviously Bryce Morgan was up to something. And Squatter grabbed the book, and he said, I'll see you chaps later," bundled up against the cold and wandered out of the club. Later, we found out what had happened. He went to the library and went up to the front desk and said, I'm just returning a book. And he set it down, began to walk away. And the man called him. He said, Sir, come back here, please. And Squatter came over. He said, "Is there a problem?" He said, "Yes." He said, "The book's overdue. You're going to have to pay a fine." And Squatter said, "Well, that's unfortunate. I'll get it back from Bryce Morgan later." Fortunately, he said, "It can't possibly be very much. What is it, a threatens or something?" The man said, "Well, this book has been overdue for 28 years. It turned out it was taken out by Bryce Morgan's grandfather and was still overdue, building up a fine for almost 30 years. Well, Squatter said, "How much do I owe you?" He said, "Well, this is a very rare book. You can't just pay for the book. You're going to have to pay the fine." It was over £400. The Squatter had all his shopping money in his wallet. He had to give him the entire contents of his wallet and his father's watch. Funniest damn thing. And as he was walking away annoyed, the man said, "Hey, you forgot your bookmark." And it put a French letter in the book as well.